What is happening? I'm sure everybody. I'm sure. I hope everybody's having a good day. I'm Robin Black. That's me. That's Rich below me, and that is Mallory to the whatever side this is. And we're geeks. We're martial arts geeks. We're nerds. And if you watched, I put out a little thing inviting people to come in. We definitely won't be talking about Conor McGregor throwing a drink at some rapper, something. Machine Gun Kelly. Nope, I already did. I said too much. We probably won't be talking about upcoming matchups, striker versus grappler in a stylistic matchup at UFC 293. We probably won't do that. What we'll probably do is geek out and nerd out, look at some old martial arts concepts and ideas. Let's say hi to these guys, and then I'm going to show you. I'll throw in some of our list of some of our topics. People, feel free to message us. We'll pop in. Below me, this is my friend Rich Chou. Rich was the head matchmaker for Bellator for many years, fought in a cage himself, and goes all the way back to Rumble on the Rock. Now he's still working with Bellator and with, what do you do, Rich? Who are you working with?
Wimp to Warrior.
Oh, yes, Wimp to Warrior. How are you, man?
Fantastic. Here we are again. For those of you guys who took the under, sorry, but here we are.
We're back.
No, we're still here, man. This is fun. This is exciting.
Yeah. I mean, literally, we got no rules. We got no structure. We got no formula, which is good. I think the three of us and a lot of the people that we hang out with are a little bit allergic to formula. Things are very structured, regimented. Language is very the same. It makes it hard to think about abstract ideas. And that's what we're going to try to do. Mallory over here, Mallory Woods. Mallory is a lifelong martial artist and thinks like a computer guy as well. And sci-fi mind. Mal, what's happening, man?
Hey, glad to be back. Looking forward to this Wednesday. It's one of those things I was looking forward to all week. So as Rich said, if you took the under, sorry, you lost out this time. We are back. So I'm looking forward for some good all martial arts talk.
My wife this week, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do the podcast every Wednesday. And she's like, you have so much going on. How much are you getting paid for this podcast? I said, nothing. I'm doing it because I'm going to hang out with my friends. We're going to talk about anything we want to. We're going to just have zero structure. It doesn't mean we're like opposed to people paying us. We will shill your cold brew probably or whatever. Or your cool retro kid t-shirt or whatever you got. But mostly we're just going to hang out and talk about martial arts. Let's take a look at some of the random topics. It's like the random martial arts topic generator. Here's some things. What is a black belt? One of the reasons that we really wanted to do this too, by the way, Black Belt Magazine, we all grew up on it. And they said, hey, why don't you stream with us too? And we're like, retro martial arts talk with Black Belt. If you told us that when we were kids, we'd have not believe it. Not that there was a podcast, such a thing. So we're going to look at a couple old articles and look at it through a new frame of minds. We're going to look at what are some of the unwritten rules of fighting. I mean, actually, let's start there. We'll look at some of the other topics in a second. So, Rich, this was your topic, unwritten rules. What were you thinking when you said, hey, let's chat about this?
Well, I'm a big, in addition to being a martial arts geek, a martial arts fanatic, I'm really big time sports fan. And, watching games, listening to the commentary, there's just certain moments in baseball, for example, the bat flip. If your guy gets beaned, someone on the other team is going to get beamed the next inning. There's these certain unwritten rules. Some are good, some are bad, and there are certainly some in basketball, in every sport really, right? Football, there's just some things you just don't do, or you need to do it a certain way. And they're not in the rule book. They're not on a website anywhere. It's just kind of when you get in, you learn that culture. Mm-hmm. And, you better follow those rules, right? According to the purists and the hardcores. Like for example, I will use one that is, I think, very applicable for our, for this conversation of martial arts. But you don't talk about what happens at training.
Mm-hmm.
Right? if you get the better of somebody, it's what it's for, right? It's training to get better. There's supposed to be no
Hey.
egos, and right, it's practice. We're here to
Mhm.
practice, learn, and get better. It's not competition. So when guys talk about practice out there, hey, I tapped this guy, or I got the better of this guy, it's kind of frowned upon by a lot of purists and hardcores and old school guys, because like you don't talk about that, right?
Mhm. What else? What else? So I'm going to have a completely random, different perspective thought on all of this. But let's before we go into my absurd thinking, let's look at what some of these unwritten rules are when you're fighting someone. Let's start with that. I'm in a fight with Mallory. We have agreed to fight. We don't hate each other more than any average competitors. In fact, we respect each other. Whatever. What do we non-verbally agree not to do or do in a professional fight? Anybody?
You know what? I think, and speaking of something that came up last week, even though there's a rule set in there for the oblique kick, I think a lot of people don't do it because they don't want it done to them. It's in there. It's legal. You can strike to the knee. But when we see it done quite effectively, as there was a fight a week ago or so ago, it just makes you cringe. Anybody that's ever had a knee injury or had knee pain, they see it. So in one way, you're like, yeah, I'm just not doing that. Definitely another, which just came up there, was I'll put this up on the screen, shows sportsmanship and respect. I think that's huge, especially with a lot of old school guys.
Okay, Rich, what's quick, the oblique kick, what camp are you in as far as unwritten rule nature of that?
It's fair game.
Yeah.
It's fair game. I mean, yeah, we're seeing how devastating it is now, and it's something new, and we all got to wrap our heads around it collectively, right? But yeah, that's in my opinion, it's fair game.
I mean, an axe kick to the face or a spinning hook kick to the temple is not less bad than a oblique kick. It's not dirty, right? So I'm gonna, Stephen Border, I appreciate you, show sportsmanship and respect. I'm gonna get crazy here. This isn't Robin Black's opinion. If you know me, you guys know me, martial arts, honor, respect, these things are really, I find to be as important a part as punching and kicking. So, but I'm gonna take a different outside perspective, not mine. Go into the fucking, sorry, we are trying not to just swear constantly, even though that's something I do all day. Let's go into the forest and find me a bucket of sportsmanship. Anybody, can you do that?
Yeah, that's
does it exist? What is it?
Right.
Go get me some.
Your sportsmanship is going to be different than mine. I'm going to come in. Maybe so. I remember, especially some of the old school teachers, if you didn't bow for 3 seconds and you didn't hold your position for 3 seconds, or like a 9-second thing, come to attention for 3 seconds, bow for 3 seconds, come back to attention for 3 seconds. If you didn't do that whole thing, it was considered disrespectful. If you just quick bow, just a little, tap your belt, tap your waist, that was considered disrespect. But you're right. What counts as respect? What counts as sportsmanship? Your bucket may be that much, just like, hey, just don't do this. Whereas someone else is like, well, I consider this more to be, and you cross the line here.
I'll tee Rich up with this as one example. Rich, I was cage side. You were sitting at your desk, and young jiu-jitsu wizard. His father's a jiu-jitsu wizard. He rolled in and grabbed the heel hook in 9 seconds and tapped this guy at Bellator. Young fellow. What's his name?
Oh,
Aviv Ghazali.
Aviv Ghazali. And so the guy went and outreached his hand. So he's coming out and he reaches out his hand. There were people in the comments, people in Twitter and wherever, not that should be overly important to an athlete, but they were like, you got a glove touch. He faked the glove touch. Aviv did no such thing. The other guy stood there and said, I want you to do a thing. If Aviv, let me go off on a tangent. If Aviv faked it, then the guy did it, and then he heel hooked it, that would still be legal. 100% legal. Again, that's not into my philosophy, but that is a legal approach you could take. Now, never mind. So he didn't do that, however. The other guy was like, I want you to touch my hand. When I'm fighting you, I don't want to do anything you want me to do. So
Right.
you're saying touch my hand. I say no. I roll and I heel hook you. What was your thoughts and thoughts on similar things, Rich?
Protect yourself at all times. I think it really depends on, again, if it's training, it's one thing, but in competition, that's the name of the game, right? Yeah, you got to protect yourself at all times, be aware at all times, and yeah, that's fair game in my opinion. So it's one of those things. I've seen this a lot. You and I are around a lot of fighters, a lot of fights. There's a lot of buildup, a lot of tension. Guys don't touch gloves during the stare down and the face off. Guys won't touch gloves to start the round. Sometimes guys just save it. You know how sometimes a round will start and, let's say the fight's been a war so far, they'll come in and hug, right? Before the round. I know I don't like it. I know some guys, it bugs them. I'm like, just save that for after.
Yeah.
Again, this is just my opinion, but and not that I'm anti-sportsmanship or professionalism and whatnot, but just in the heat of battle like that, wait till the end. I think, even Chandler, along the same lines, I think Chandler said something like, look, if you knock me out and you beat me, like, don't come over and try and check up on me immediately or try and help me up, or just let me have that moment. Let me figure it out. Let me do it on my own. Don't, like, there's just certain things that can wait till after the fight, and perhaps touching the gloves or something along those lines can wait. And I don't feel like it's the guy's a poor sport. Let them have their moment after. What we see and how we feel, maybe it doesn't matter as much as how the opponent feels. Like, hey, we talked after the fight. It's all good.
Yeah. True. What the audience observes. So Adam informed us that our audio is weird. We noticed it too, Adam. I don't know if we can fix it. Maybe we'll click out one at a time and pop back in. I don't know. Who knows? If anyone's like a tech wizard that can give us advice on what to do with our weird StreamYard audio, please let us know. What the audience observes and they find to be respectful and not respectful, to your point, Rich, is, and this is a big one, is not the same as what the fighter does. Now, Chris, this is slightly off topic if we approach it correctly and truthfully. But what about raining hammer fist down on an obvious KO'd opponent? So does anybody else notice that this is just a massive reaction of the audience all the time? Anybody? Have you guys noticed that?
Well, I think it's because, we don't like seeing humans heads bouncing off of the mat and everything. But usually when you get that reaction, it's a bang bang moment, and that fighter's taught to, I'm going to keep going until the referee pulls me off the opponent.
It's beyond that.
Right.
It's beyond that. We're using words to describe something that operates without words. So when we see an obvious KO'd opponent, I'll say this 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways from my experience and the experience of hundreds of other fighters that we've been around and trained with and cornered, and Rich has booked and been with, trained with, etc. And yet people will still often choose just to completely disregard what I'm about to say and say, yeah, but it's so obvious. It is not obvious to the athlete in the moment. And this will sound crazy, and people, again, want to reject this. But to properly focus my attention on a high-level, dangerous task in real time like that is to supersede other things. So I don't have to pee. I don't know my wife's name. I don't know where I work. I don't have any tax credit coming to me by the government. I don't know what color my shorts are, and I sure as fuck don't know if that guy's unconscious or not. Also, when we were talking about swearing, I'm going to use this as an example much later of how we do and don't do things. But you don't know. Like, we, the viewer, see a thing and then we'll see it in slow motion. It's like, that guy's obviously unconscious, and we react. That means he's a bad person. The guy who's hitting him is a bad person. He too can see that this man is unconscious and has decided to hurt him. None of that is true. That man cannot see that man is unconscious. It's happening in less than 1 second or 2 seconds or 6 seconds. And I'll finish with this and then hand it over to you guys. Rich, you've seen this 100 times. Some of these people don't revert to normal for many minutes, 15, 20 minutes until after the fight, where they start to be able to assess the world around them logically. Correct?
Absolutely. Look, it's one thing if you're holding on to a choke too long or a submission and, the ref has stopped it. But those moments where, you drop a guy and he's out, but you keep going and then the ref comes in and you're at home sitting there saying, oh, he ate one or two unnecessary shots. Like you said, I think in that situation, I do sympathize isn't the right word, but I do understand.
Empathize.
Yes, it's a little like you're in the zone, right? And it's the heat of battle, the heat of the moment. Again, I am more critical when it's a submission. We've seen it. Hey, guys tapping or the refs, trying to pry your hands off, and you're still there insistent on putting this guy out. Yeah, to me, that's
you illustrate the point beautifully.
Across the line, yeah.
You know why there is a massive difference is because every day, all day, for 10 years, you've submitted guys and they've tapped and you've understood. And you've never mind. Also, the ref has told you it is trained into you to know when it is over. You never knock anybody out in training. I mean, not never, but almost never. You certainly never kick anybody in the head and then they fall down in a highly focused. And in fact, as you watch yourself do it. So there was a young man named Nick Denis. Nick fought, I was his manager, a friend. I managed about 20 or 30 athletes on my sort of road to learning all the different puzzle pieces of the game. Awful job, worst job ever. Although Nick made us, got a fight of the night bonus and gave me 10%. It was the night before my wedding. So he gave me $6,500 and it paid off all of my wedding debts because he knocked the guy out in like 30 seconds in his debut. But in the fight before that, he picks up this kid, Nick Mamalis. It's on the internet. He hits him and then he grabs him. And as the guy's standing up, he choke slams him. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this, but Nick literally choke slams him unconscious. And that was the night that he got if anyone wants to look it up on YouTube, Nick Denis, Nick Mamalis, and he choke slams this guy unconscious. And then he's there and the guy is unconscious and he's hitting him. And I was talking to him after, and Nick is the nicest person in the world, the nicest guy you'll ever meet. And he was like he watched himself do it. And then his brain created an explanation for what was happening. I said, well, what were you doing? He said, I think I was like, oh my God, I hope he doesn't wake up and start fighting me and the ref's not here yet. Now, when I showed it back to him, it was about 2 seconds. That's not long enough to even make that sentence, never mind form that sentence in your mind. But he just did it because he didn't know how any other approach to be able to do it. And then later tried to explain his own behavior. Because you're not thinking. That's the part that people, I think, miss when they're judging this. But it's also at play in everything else we watch in a fight. A fight is taking place in an altered state of emotion and focus.
I would agree with you on that. Like you said, the adrenaline is pumping so much, and especially Richard's point about holding submissions too long. I think it was Husamar Paul Harris.
Yeah,
that's who came to mind immediately. I mean, first of all, the guy's built like a VF bug just shoved into human form, and he would dive on heel hooks, and you could almost just see the panic in his opponent's eyes that, oh my goodness, this guy's got a hold of my foot and who knows what's going to happen next. And when he's continually twisting, but going back to Robert's point, his objective is to end the fight. I mean, he's just ending the fight. And whether he's turning your foot at this angle or a more severe angle, his idea is that I'm ending it. And he may not hear the ref, but the ref is usually yelling at you and tugging on you and everything else. And the seconds that go by that happens, and as you start to think about what ligaments are tearing here and there, it makes you cringe. Yeah. But take it to another angle. You mentioned before, Robin, about touching gloves and Richard, like obviously hugging between rounds and everything. How many times do we hear the oohs and the chills when there's been a most anticipated fight and one of the fighter goes like this, or they just stand there, no glove touch, thank you very much, and you hear that ooh. But then you also get something like we'll go back to Jorge and Ben Askren when the super necessary punches came in. Yeah. Obviously, Askren was out, but the ref had to come in, so there was a little extra.
Yeah, and for some reason, nobody was mad at Jorge. I get it. I love Jorge.
It built
why was nobody
his
mad
lore.
at him?
Yeah, so it's but again, holding that submission too long, it just makes me cringe anytime I go back and watch any of those replays from that.
Yeah, agree. To just comment real quickly on that, Jorge's was well within the rules, right? Like
the ref had not stopped it.
Yeah, it was well within. Yeah, but then the unwritten rules kicks in, right? Well, if he's out, you're not supposed to do that. But he was well within the rules there. Again, I'm way more critical on subs. Those guys all tapped. Alaris held on, and hence why he received suspension and bans from certain athletic commissions, because it wasn't just once.
No,
it was a few times. We've seen it before too, where you've seen a guy caught in a rear naked choke, he's tapping, and just the guy is not letting go.
Yep. And again, and again, one of the major differences is that guy has rear naked choked in training 6,000 people. Like, this isn't a surprise result. This happens 16 times a week in training. Yeah, you know what to do. When you punch a guy in the face and he falls down and collapses on the ground, you don't get to practice that. There is no practice for that. You don't get to knock out. You can submit 15 people in training today. You should knock out 0. So you just don't get to practice it. We sit back, and some of it is just our response as humans. We sit back and observe. And people, this is a really tricky one. And, there's a whole world of journalists rebranding themselves as commentators or analysts, right? And good on them if they can do it, But what you're missing constantly is the third person perspective is not only dramatically different than the first person when you're fighting and punches are coming at you and your head is ringing and stuff. It actually informs you better in many ways. You can see things they'll never see from the third person perspective. I've shown the best fighters in the world footage of their shit, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know I did that. It happens all the time because we're third person. We can see, look, it's obvious that guy's knocked out. Why are you hammer fisting his face? But to him, it is not obvious. Again, if you want to be mad, you'll keep being mad no matter what somebody experienced or tells you. But that one to me that's people are doing it more and more. They think that's, but so another thought on unwritten rules is, what if so we have all these things, don't do this, don't talk. Let me throw this to you guys before I go on to this thought. What about in talking? What about in talking and weigh-ins in the thing in advance? So this is a big one right now. Don't talk about people's families.
Don't talk about people's religion.
I'm not going to do that. My personal preference is not going to do that. But me, the analyst from 30,000 feet, says, if that's so supposedly not allowed and I do it, it will be the ultimate provocation and may have some incredible value.
It could cause you to be on tilt and react. I think that was one of the results of a year-long promotion between Conor and
Khabib?
Not
Aldo?
Khabib. No, Aldo. Aldo wanted to get in there and just smash him so much that you get caught up in emotion. So in a way, it can be used as a training tool, especially, think about people that talk. Like, for example, people want to smash MVP because of what he says, what he does in the ring, what he does after. And we love it. We eat it up and everything. He's holding an infinity gauntlet. He's doing this, that, and the other. But on the other hand, that can be used as a weapon against your opponent. So there's no rule. Like you said, this is completely unwritten, but I think it is taken a little bit too far. If you're talking about someone's wife, you're talking about religion, you're talking about someone's family. People take that really personal. I would never go up to Mike Chiesa and say something about his family members. The guy, he says straight up, just don't say anything about that. And I think it also depends on the person. Is that within you as a person, not a fighter, because you can take on a persona as a fighter, but to have that in your arsenal? Does that help to serve you more if you do that?
Rich.
Very interesting topic here. Look, I've seen it play out to where after the fight, the guys come together and they say, hey, I was just trying to generate more interest, trying to just get us, build this fight up, man. and you've seen people squash the beef, so to speak, and kind of move on. But yeah, man, for me, I consider it out of bounds. But and again, like I said, I've seen it really help build up a fight. From a promotional standpoint, those are the things you kind of embrace when it just all of a sudden takes it to the next level, and there's more interest. At the end of the day, seeing these guys understand why it was necessary, and it doesn't always play out that way. Some guys double down after, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh shit, okay, well,
here we go again.
Yeah. Let me.
This is really like, we are taking it there. So, yeah, for me, it's off limits, but clearly, it's out there, and guys are utilizing it, whether it's for mental warfare or a general disdain for your opponent. I always like to see, again, what happens after. Are these guys cool now? Did they talk it out? And then you understand. Because, right, we've seen several fights where you're like, oh, my God, these guys absolutely hate each other. They went there. They took it there. And after the fight, it's all over.
Right. The respect comes.
Conor Khabib ended in a riot. And to this day, they still are jawing at each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they doubled down, tripled down on it, right? So
the Art of War, Chapter 1, laying plans, right? 18. All warfare is rooted in deception. Hence, when able to attack, we must seem unable. That's Michael Page. He's, off balance. When we're near, he must seem far, far. We must seem near. Hold out baits to entice the enemy, feign disorder, and crush him. If he is secure on all points, be prepared for him. Here, 22. If your opponent is of choleric temper, seek to irritate him. Pretend to be weak that he may grow arrogant, right? Like all of these things, attack him when he is unprepared, etc. All of these concepts have been around forever. The idea, if you get mad, so what's the benefit of me making you mad? Is you will make errors, right? You will make errors. You will overreact and make errors. We wanted Jose Aldo to do that. Jose Aldo did that. He made him mad, and that worked. He wanted Khabib to do that. Khabib did that. Khabib waited until after he'd smashed Conor's face in, because there's another element to high-level martial artistry, and that is to use your emotion. Embrace it, use it, and let it guide you, which Khabib did. Remember, he's hitting him. You want to talk?
Yeah, let's talk now.
You want to talk? Let's talk, right?
When you heard that mic, when you heard that audio, it was like,
you want to talk?
Was intense, man.
Let's talk. So, but Khabib
he wasn't playing that whole time.
No, he wasn't
playing. Yeah.
But that is the highest level of martial artistry, is to not suppress your emotion, but to use it to sharpen you, right? But Khabib did make errors after. He jumped over the fence. He created a thing. His friends got suspended. There was an error. He lost money. There was a certain amount of balance of people were like, yeah, man, you stood up for our religion and our beliefs. Others were like, that obviously that was bad. None of that was planned. And presumably, although there were certainly things that some of his guys did that seemed to be pretty organized when they were in the cage. But that is somebody using their energy correctly. They've completed the assignment. The war has been done, and now I go a little nuts, and that's okay. And so, but what Conor wanted, he got, just not in the way that he wanted. He got beaten, and Khabib was the better martial artist, able to focus that. But for a lot of these guys to be unencumbered by these constructs, and that's what they are. Unwritten rules, totally a human construct. It's not real. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist, right? It's unwritten. If it's unwritten, how is it a rule, right? It's a construct. A sportsmanship, respect, all of these things, these are human constructs. If you choose to be completely unencumbered by them, it can be very powerful. Again, this is not my personal feeling, but this is true in combat.
Yeah. And sometimes those will serve to hold you back. But one of the things I wanted to think of is that everyone's been angry to the point where they were ready to fight there, and you're hyped up, and you're no matter what the situation is, and yet we are paying two individuals to meet at a certain time and date and fight for a belt and a purse, essentially. But after that, speaking specifically for Khabib, how, and you mentioned, Robin, before, how it takes a few minutes for guys to come down off the hype. The adrenaline's just pumping so much. You are in fight mode. And then all of a sudden, a referee waves it off, and you just can't suppress that and come back down.
Mm-hmm.
And you look cage side and you see a guy that's been also talking trash. Sure, you're going to jump over the cage and go airborne on them. That's where you need a good cornerman, someone there to help de-escalate.
Yeah, but they're all pretty wound up too, right?
Everybody's
when you proxy. But these are what happens when you break these unwritten rules. When you do these things, religion, family, all of these things that we call sacred. The three of us are not going to do that, and we're not going to look favorably on somebody who does that. But it can be powerful. But when it backfires, it's going to backfire real bad too.
That's true.
Obviously, Team Khabib felt like he broke an unwritten rule.
Yeah. No, for them, it's written. In their strong religious beliefs that govern their lives. It is written.
Yeah.
And he broke it, right?
Yeah.
And hey, man, that's the risk. I would warn anyone that wants to play with these things. You're playing with things that are very powerful. And you can lighten the mood a little bit by bring up the guy who got hit with the twisted T. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yes, in the convenience store.
Yeah, when I broke that down, I was like, this guy's acting like a jackass. But now there have been words, phrases, ideas that have been weaponized that reflect years of pain and oppression. You chose to use those. Mm-hmm. You've just changed this whole game here, right? Again, someone could judge that and goes, oh, it's just a word, or it's just a phrase, or what's religion, or what Eddie Alvarez's family. I mean, what's the big deal? It's a big deal to him. And it's a big deal to many. And you chose to go there. Now you got a twisted T in the brain, and these are the dangers of these things. And maybe that is why most of us say, you know what? We have decided to be competitors, opponents. On some level, we are partners in this. We're both getting paid. Rich signed you to fight me, and that's happening there. We both are getting paid. We want to defeat the other, but we're in this together. Maybe there's some shit that we should just gently agree. We're cool like this. And if you choose not to, you're definitely going into some danger. It's up to you, but you are going into some dangerous shit.
Yep.
There's a great comment here from a fight that was a while ago. Remember how frustrated Paul Daly got against Koscheck? And I remember that it was interesting because the build up to that fight, where you kind of, to take it to a wrestling concept, you've got a baby face and a heel. Well, they were both heels in the fight. There was both, but I'm the baddest. I'm the baddest. And Koscheck talked up, hey, I'm not going to use my wrestling. I want to stand and bang, which is of course what Daly, he wanted that. He, that's what he's known for. And he gets out wrestled the entire match. And at the end, he goes and takes a swipe at Koscheck once the fight is over. And Dan Margliotta has to grab him and, hold him up against the cage. And of course he gets dismissed from the UFC for that. But he had gotten so much into his head and I know it's incredibly frustrating. You train for a fight, 6-8 weeks, and it goes completely opposite of the way you think it's going to go. And, Koscheck pitched a shutout.
Yeah. Rich, you've been around a lot of these situations. And I know Paul, and I really like Paul. I think he's a good brilliant martial artist, really good dude, really brilliant martial artist. But he is driven by emotion, which is powerful. But it's also, these are our great strengths are often our great weaknesses, or the things that undermine us. And I've seen Paul do that a couple of times, even in Bellator. Mm-hmm. Not to that level.
Guys like that, people will analyze that passion, that emotion. And I see a guy like Paul, who's just a really accomplished martial artist. Like, man, that's just what works for him. If you took that away from him,
that's that
guy. What would you have? He's extremely, he's had an amazing career. Really nice resurgence here as of late. I just complimented him after the last couple fights. I mean, his longevity. There's something to be said about that. But yeah, these highly emotional guys, I just feel like if you took that away from them and they were more zen, they wouldn't be who they are, and perhaps wouldn't have the same results and the same success. So you be you, right? And go with what works for you. And look, for the most part, it's worked for him.
Right. I mean, the
Yep.
one thing that I have to say is that one morning at like 5 a.m., I was in England and I was going to go to Ireland, and I heard someone talking behind me, and I recognized that's Paul Daly. I recognized him by his voice only. And he couldn't have been the nicest guy on the short flight over from England to Ireland. And, he was, hey, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to this big karate tournament in Ireland. Oh, are you competing? No, I'm just covering for you. Oh, man, you're still lucky. Look, you got it, and just talking to him for, the 45 minutes or hour flight. And I could hear his passion. I think he was going over to train someone. He wasn't going to fight, but he was going to train someone and help out. But you're right. We like to say that it's passion, and that passion shows out.
Okay. We've got a lot of other topics we wanted to talk about, but this kind of can morph into this. We spend a lot of time when we're definitely in my job, when I'm commentating, fighting people who do my job, and things around the nature, when we share what we do a lot of talking about a kick and a punch and a check hook and pivot to the left, all this stuff. Did I spell authentic wrong? Right? It doesn't look right, but something looks wrong there. Like it's missing an X or something. But you have to be the individual. Who the individual is far more important than how they throw leg kicks. A leg kick is just a tool. Like, it's just a kick. How we got a great jab and amazing. I talked about this a little last week. It's not about how good my left hook is so much as it's about what I am, who I am, how I think, what I want, how I'm driven, my courage and fear, and those balances. That's what a martial artist in a fight is. He isn't takedown defense and wonderful spinning attacks. He is an individual person, and Paul was a great example, because Paul's emotion is a big part of his success, and different people are like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Paul is a classically trained martial artist, striking, obviously, and I know he does jiu-jitsu quite a bit. I see him post where he's, wearing a gi and learning and proud of his element there, and leveling up with the belts and whatnot. So he has that. He knows what it's all about. That's where he started. But you put a guy like that in the cage, and even just the buildup of a fight, you see something. This transformation kind of occurs, and you're right, that identity that he assumes, it's not the nice guy martial artist anymore. It's a fighter that's understands that the other guy is trying to hurt him, and also in several cases stop you from making extra money, from advancing your career. There's so many different things, and the process he goes through, and the transformation, and what he needs to do, in his mind to get in that zone. Yeah, there's a lot on the line here.
Yeah.
This isn't like, oh man, this guy, what's his problem? He's a hothead. Why does he have to be that way? And well, because he has to.
Hey, that's who he is. Ryan, I'm going to pull somebody else out. Ryan Bader. Ryan Bader is, so if we just, and what I'm about to do is not accurate. I was going to say a combat identity, you can classify them loosely. And yes, when I talked to Faraz about this before, he's like, they're all different, but there are types, right? There are certain types. He goes, it might be 10, might be 12, depending how you look at it. But Ryan Bader is a prototype athlete, right? He is a martial artist. He is a fighter, but he is an athlete. He's training like an athlete. He's thinking like an athlete. He's staying calm like an athlete, and he's running plays on you, right? That's a Ryan Bader. Michael Venom Page, Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva is an artist, right? He will train like an athlete. He is a fighter, but he is an artist. He's out there expressing his individuality, right? Paul Daly, like we were just saying, he's some hybrid, but fighter is he's a great artist and a great athlete, but fighter is at the root of how he's going to go out there and take this fight. And those identities are real. We have the ability to change ourselves, to remodel ourselves according to the task. If I have to fight Ryan Bader, I don't want to fight Ryan Bader. But you know what I mean? Like, if someone had to fight Ryan Bader or someone had to fight Anderson Silva, they could modify their approach we have the ability to change ourselves. But at our root, we are what we are, and we need to be authentic, or else we're acting. We shouldn't be acting. We should be expressing.
Right. Very interesting train of thought there, Robin, because I've seen throughout my career the athlete versus the fighter, right? Some of these guys grew up fighting street fights, just grew up a little rougher, and other guys grew up a little more polished. They were athletes, right? The athlete mentality. Some guys approach a fight and look at it as a sporting contest. Other guys look at it, as a fight. Like that when you hear the guys say, "Oh, I'm prepared to die in there," your opponent might not be like, you'd be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa." I signed a contract. We're going to go in there, do our thing for 15 minutes at most. I plan on walking out of there and going home. And other guys are like, I'm prepared to leave it all in there and die in there, right? That whole mentality and identity, it's it's very, very interesting. There's something to be said about the guy who's prepared to leave it all in there, right? And literally leave it all in there, in there if necessary. And
one of the things I was going to go ahead, Robin. One of the things that I think of, the name that comes when you said authentic sports identity, authentic combat identity, Diaz. Take your pick. Take whichever one you want. But the mystique, if you're fighting one of those guys, that comes along with that, and I think that it's the same in and outside the cage, dojo, ring. They are who they are. I think a lot of people may or may not have seen this. There's a picture of I think it's a first or second grade Nick Diaz in elementary school. The kids, and he's got that's at what, 6 or 7 years old. That's how he's born. That's the person he is.
He was made for this life, for this combat life. These modern day gladiators. Some guys really are modern day samurais, modern day gladiators. They approach it as such, and the contrast is fascinating to me. Where these guys are, Nick and Nate. I think BJ Penn is like that. These guys are all jiu-jitsu guys that still to this day put on the gi, put on the belt, bow, respect, have that background, have that in them. But when it's time to go,
it's time to go.
They turn into fighters, right? So they kind of leave the martial arts mentality and spirit behind just for a moment, and then just take a whole different approach when they get into the cage and into competition. So I'm fascinated with that balance of the two, yin and yang, right?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So I popped this up too, because this was something you had mentioned, Rich, when we were looking at different things that we wanted to talk about. And you were like, MMA is not a sport. And I was like, I'm interested in this conversation.
Well, I've been on the promotional side for a long time, as you mentioned earlier, Robin. That's kind of my background professionally, being a matchmaker or on the promotional side for the last 20 years. And, that the statement, oftentimes you'll see it from media and fans, but bad for the sport. And we just mentioned him a little while ago, but Nick Diaz, I believe, said bad for the sport. What does that even mean? Like, what are you even talking about? This guy is trying to take me down, pin me down, and elbow the shit out of me. Sport, bad for the sport. What are we talking about here? And that's always stuck with me, because I was also thinking and looking at this from that perspective as well prior. Certain guys like GSP, he considers himself a sportsman, right? But the name of the game and the number one, look, sport, sometimes I see it being, we got to score more points, right? Like violence is almost just a means to an end, right? In certain football, you're not trying to hurt guys and knock them out. You're trying to score more points. Ultimately, that's what you're trying to do. The violence is kind of a means to an end, but the violence in MMA and in combat sports in general, right, fellas, that is the game.
it's required.
It's not to hurt you so I can, in an effort to score more points. No, I'm just trying to hurt you. And some guys embrace that. Like, yeah, fighting is fighting, right? This ain't a sport. Like if you want a sport, go watch, basketball, go watch baseball, go watch polo. But when a dude is on,
I'm not watching polo.
Yeah, but that's like the most classic. What to me, golf, tennis, polo, one of these a sportsman of the year and sport, and then you see a guy pinning another guy against the fence and elbowing him till he bleeds. Right? Is he a sportsman? I don't know. That's that's up for discussion and debate, I think.
So my thought is that a lot of things are simultaneously a lot of things, right? An apple is food, it's a fruit, it's a device you can throw at people. You can cut it up and turn it into stuff. It can be a juice. It's a lot of stuff, right? And fighting is the same. Like when we watch Bellator, the UFC, One, Glory, kickboxing, whatever, we are watching a televised sport. But so Rich and I are the three of us are good friends, and Rich and I are very good friends. And one of the things Rich said earlier is like, I love sports. Rich and I are very good friends, but we feel different. I hate sports. Yeah. I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, actually, I shouldn't say that. When I watch football with the sound off, and I look at it from the two armies, I'm like, this shit is fascinating, right? This shit is fascinating. And I can feel the same thing about even soccer, football, like these armies with objectives. What I hate is the way that it is packaged. And that's what I think of when I think of sport. Okay. It is a packaged television product. And I cover the UFC for TSN in Canada, and I do a lot of cool stuff for Bellator, and I love everybody over there. I've got working on one championship breakdown, so please forgive me. But the broadcasts are barely watchable for me. It's just the hype and nonsense. This is the best ever against the greatest ever. The winner will get a title shot against the best of all time. Like, what the fuck are we even doing here, right? Like it's just hype. It's hype and it's compliments piled on, and it's this guy's gonna win. No, this guy's gonna win. Two guys in suits yelling at a set desk. I hate that, but I love martial arts. I love the contest. I love two football teams going. If two basketball teams were on in a bar or a restaurant and I don't have to see the broadcast, I'm like, this is wild. Look at those athletes. Look at these incredible people move. So I have to watch this televised sport to be able to get what I love, which is the art of fighting. But that art of fighting is happening whether you and people who have fought have had this experience. Many, and say Dennis Kang. Dennis Kang's a great OG. He's been around forever. He's a Canadian, and he fought in Korea and all over the place. I have broken down some of Dennis Kang's fights where he fought in front of 15,000 people and televised up for 1 million. And I was in an arena where Dennis Kang fought in front of 11 people, and I was one of them. They were the same fight. You were still fighting. It had nothing to do with, whether there's a belt or there is, double purse or it's televised on whatever. That guy's trying to kill me, and I have to use my lifetime of training to fight him. And that's the beauty for me. And that thing is independent of rankings, hype, media, sales, Robin Black, Joe Rogan, Michael Bisping. None of that's relevant. This fight exists regardless of all of that. And that part isn't a sport. That part's two humans fighting.
I think you can break it down a little bit different. Let's say, we're playing basketball, and the worst thing, barring injury, the worst thing that's going to happen to me in basketball is I'm going to get crossed over, my ankle's going to get broken, I'm going to get dunked on. At the end of the night, I'm going to go home, win or loss, and hey, it's great. In MMA or combat sports, the winner is determined by about this guy's trying to separate me from my consciousness. He's trying to cause an injury enough by either leg kicking or a submission that I want to voluntarily give up and say he's the winner. So in order for one person to win, you're not just going to go over there and say, hey, it's not poker. I've got the better hand. Oh, you do? Well, you won. No, I want to encourage you to give up, or when I encourage you to not be able to fight by getting knocked out, by getting submitted, this, that, and the other. So yeah, when you're there, you have to fight and you have to, do that. It takes on a whole different break from basketball or baseball or anything, because in the night, those guys are going to go, they'll grab a beer and everything. It is a sport, and a winner is determined, but the way you get there is different.
Yeah.
Look, Robin, what you said earlier, I totally relate to, just this raw thing that fighting is. And I said it earlier, fighting is fighting, right? It's its own special, unique thing. And a long time ago, or actually not that long ago, really, now that I think about it, we had to regulate this thing, right? You had to make rules and make it acceptable. So it wasn't human cockfighting, as some would say, right? We had to rounds in there and put rules and make this thing somewhat civil in a way. So we domesticated it, right? We had to, in some ways, this beast, right, and just made it acceptable for consumption by the masses, for states to allow it, to accept it, because at one point it wasn't accepted anywhere, right? There were no time limits, there were no rules. That was how this thing all started. And then over time, certain minds, brilliant entertainment and promotional minds, all said, well, this thing, we need to make it for the masses. We need to package it and present this a little differently. So yes, we do need rules. We do need limits. And here we are today. And look, kudos to those guys, right? But going back to this original premise, when I don't get, that statement, oh, bad for the sport, that doesn't, that doesn't bother me. It's bad for the sport. Oh, look at what's happening in boxing. Look at these guys. Look at those guys. It's just, this guy's is bad for the sport, a bad representative of MMA. Yeah, I don't
get it. I'm with you. Do you also see times where, it's a lot of trying to fool the audience that has to happen when you sell a product. When you package a product and you try to mainstream sell it and grow it, you have to fool the audience a great deal. So sometimes you'll see people who, and we're all as bad for it. All of the different ones I work for are equally, and different things we cover are equally bad at different times. We will go and say, we're trying to grow the sport. And you'll see this, we've taught the audience to be like, well, if it sells more pay-per-views, it makes more money, goes down to the fighters. No, not really. Not really, right? It doesn't tend to. This idea, when a large corporation is trying to make an extra $200 million, often they'll package it like, we're trying to grow the sport. You'll hear executives at the UFC say it more than others, but this will be said in any large company, but we're trying to grow the sport. You're not trying to grow the sport. You're trying to make more money for your corporation. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently. Coca-Cola does that, and Nike does that, and StreamYard does that, and YouTube does that. There's nothing inherently wrong with, the UFC or One Championship or Bellator or the PFL trying to make more money. What's a little dirty is when you then try to get the audience to go, this somehow helps these professional martial artists, or, this grows the sport and is good for everybody. That's not always true. And so this idea of calling it a sport and packaging it as a sport, when really it is a rule set that we've all agreed upon, and we have judges and referees that are there to sanction it, and then different individual corporations make money from it. You know what I mean? Like this loose sport thing is sort of self-serving more than it's real.
Yeah, sure. Agreed. And just to add a little wrinkle in there on an example I used last week, one of the most unsatisfying moments for a fan is when the guy who gets beat up wins the fight, right? I mean, you won the sporting contest, but if we're talking about the rules of a fight, or, the perception of who do you want to be in a fight, the guy that's completely beaten, battered, and bloody, getting his hand raised, or the guy next to him who doesn't have a single mark on his face and is just like,
But if that is you too,
but I lost the sporting contest.
Yeah. So, but now let's look at it in sort of how the packaging of time and space and storytelling and micro and macro kind of works. Mallory and Rich fight. Rich kicks the shit out of Mallory, but Mallory wins the sporting contest.
Yeah.
If I ask you today, right this minute, who you'd rather be, or you ask me who I'd rather be Rich. You kick the shit out of Mallory. But if I ask him in 6 weeks, and Mallory made $400,000 and you made $200,000, now we're going to get a slightly different story.
No, totally. Again, that is purely, because from a economic standpoint, the winner, hey, I want my win bonus, or whatever. I came out on top, I advance, I move on, you do not, right? So from a business standpoint, I won, but just the whole essence of a fight, right? Like, hurt your opponent and don't get hurt, right?
Yeah.
And it's just one of those moments where it's fighting versus sport, and then hence why we need to have these discussions. So
we got a couple other things we want to touch on. I want to show you guys a couple of these old articles, because this kind of nerding out is what got us first to get together to do this podcast. Wrestlers threaten judo. That's got some gold in there. And then power without strength. That's an Aikido article. We're going to have some issues with some of that, I think. Although we can talk generally about Aikido in a second, but we should bring on McDojo Life at some point for this. So, but let's talk about a couple things. This one's interesting, and I think it connects to this one a certain bit. But let's this popped up last week, and I just saved it. What were you guys thinking when we were talking about some of these myths? If we go back to early days, I could give you the death touch and you would die. I mean, we know that's a myth. We're pretty sure, biologically speaking, there is no death touch.
I have another fun one along those lines, kind of, that has become some of these pop culture, if you're a black belt, you have to go get registered, right? You're now
your hands.
Go register your hands.
Yeah, now you're a lethal weapon. Just funny things like that we grew up on, right? Silly myths like that.
The reason when we brought this one up and I added this one is, again, we're at kind of an interesting point right now. There is this. I remember talking to Jordan Meehan, Rich. You've booked his fights. His dad Lee and Jordan. They're friends of mine, and Mal, I'm surprised, but we haven't had either of them on our old podcast that we were doing around Bellator fights. But Jordan, I remember sitting down with him before one of his fights. Might have been his Bellator debut, or and he was saying, there is the way that people outside of fighting, not actually in the cage, talk about fighting, and then there's the actual real thing that's happening. And he was like, more and more that is becoming. Those two things are becoming kind of not even parallel anymore. This is a strange part about it, but and this might muddy this conversation slightly. But so when we do even the highest level martial arts fighters, world champions, Olympians, Daniel Cormier, for example, brilliant, he will still narrate a fight in this kind of artificial language, non-reality. And it's because he has to. It's because the producers tell him, and it's just also what starts to happen. Meanwhile, there's real fighting happening. An issue begins where actually now we put a camera on the coaches. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but coaches coaching fighters now with a camera on them, they're saying shit for the audience. Have you guys noticed this? It distresses me when I watch that. They don't know they're doing it. They're not being bad people. They're not selling out their fighter, but they're sitting there going, all right, we got to put more volume on him. When you're facing a kicker, make sure, what the fuck are you even, give him 2 instructions, but there's a camera on him. He's nervous, or he or she is nervous. And they're like, with a kicker, make sure you move. They feel like they've got to sound smart. And so they're actually starting to tell the narration of the fake fighting, that is how we narrate and commentate fighting today, to their fighter. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. It's great that we sometimes will see, hey, let's go to the corner cam and see what's going on and everything. It's not what you would say if you didn't know that camera was going to be on you at that time.
Yes. And what they're now saying is, so when we commentate, there's reasons that even the very best martial artists will do this. Mostly it's time and hype, and because we are selling something. So it's like, this guy's the best, he's got crazy power, and blah, 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 blah. the actual combat is happening differently, and coaches were speaking differently even as this evolved. But suddenly, the conversation in the corner that the martial artist is now hearing is, and let me make a try to make it more concise. Real fighting is astronomy. How you fight, train, practice, that's astronomy. And the way we commentate fighting is astrology, right? It's not the same thing. We talk about it on television. Weirdly, the astrology, the not real accurate way to analyze and discuss and interpret and internalize fighting, is becoming the main language and is interfering with our actual understanding of martial arts. Does this make sense? Do I sound crazy?
I think one thing I want to put on there, just especially going back for hearing, we're going to go to the coaches cam. And so when we had empty arenas, completely empty arenas, and we still had fighting going on with COVID, and you literally can hear what this coach is saying while the fight's going on, and you can hear what other coaches is completely different than we're going to put the camera on them and hear what's going on in the corner. They are saying more intelligible things as the fight's going on, instead of saying things that you kind of want to hear for TV, what's kind of made up for that.
Let me throw one more, try my best to make sense of my bizarre thinking here. And then let's see, Rich, you've been digesting this thinking. For example, in truth, it is not true that against a southpaw, you always put your front foot on the outside. That is not true, right? That is just fundamentally not true. It is not true that you never move towards the power hand of your opponent. It is not true that you never throw a naked leg kick. None of those things are true. But we say they're true. And then later people start to believe they're true. And then coaches are actually saying them on television because that's how the audience thinks. And it's interfering with our greater understanding of what is true. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Look, I think some guys are going to some athletes, because I think we've seen some really spectacular women fighting over the last several years. Some martial artists, some fighters are just, they smash those truths, Yeah. We see them just change the game, so to speak, or, break through and just really change our minds on how things are. And I think that's the beauty of this game, of this art that we go back to. Why do we love it? Because it's constantly evolving and changing. So yeah, are there absolute truths in this world? Maybe not, for that reason, right? And I think that's a good thing. Some people might hate that, right? But the foundation and structure needs to be there. I think it's there, but I think certain people have the ability to really play with it.
Yeah. I mean, so let's take something simple. Never throw a naked leg kick. So you mentioned BJ Penn. This is the greatest example of all time to me. BJ Penn, did you read his book, like his technique book? I think he called it the Bible or the Big Book of Fighting or something. It was one of those, what do you call that company that used to like, no, the one that used to put out all the fighting books.
Oh, okay.
Victory Belt. Victory Belt put out this BJ one, and it was BJ's book. In this book, he's explaining, this is how I go in on a single, this is how I do it. Just kind of his basic spider web. In that book, he said, I don't throw kicks. If I throw, there was maybe something about leg kicks, but mostly it's like head kicks are not for MMA. Don't do it. He never threw one ever in his life. He literally wrote a book saying that he would never throw a head kick ever in his life. He laid down that lie for so long until he kicked Diego Sanchez in the head.
And then won the fight that way.
Yeah, and cut him wide open.
Cut him, right.
That was the highest level of misdirection, of lying, of creating a fake reality that you'll ever see in your life. Nate Diaz, when he landed that punch on in that last fight
against
Edwards.
Yeah,
I was thinking of Leon's brother because I just did a breakdown of his brother. When Nate lands that punch on Leon Edwards, he just spent 22 minutes purposefully throwing really shallow left hands, right? And you see it. You go back and watch them all. They're all real shallow. Like that is just like that's 22 minutes of getting beat up and not being like to create a lie that you can exploit and it's amazing, right? And even me saying this now, anybody watching this, go back and watch that fight. There's not a single left hand that penetrates anywhere near as deep as that one. It was, and Josh Barnett used to do this a lot. That's impressive, 22 minutes. But BJ Penn did it for like 15 years to set up that head kick.
Okay, two things I want to say. I'll start with your comment on BJ. I haven't been around him for several camps and around him for a good portion of his career. We joked after, like, have you been practicing this in secret, in private? Because he didn't kick in practice either, at least not with the group. So it's funny to see him pull that off. Great athlete, a true martial artist. He obviously knew how to throw a freaking head kick. But just so funny how he didn't train that. That wasn't part of training. It was a very boxing heavy as far as striking goes, right? With some knees and whatnot. But yeah, it was funny that he pulled that off. So I had to add that little comment.
15 years of setting that kick up.
He was for all these years.
He's committed.
He was doing it in his secret training with it. And the second thing, Nate versus Leon. Again, going back to what I said earlier, Nate won the fight.
That's right.
And he was the people's champ that night, right? The public opinion was, oh man, if he was out on the street, it would have been over, right? And a lot of people, that started that conversation. So yes, Leon won the sporting contest. The fans and a lot of people think Nate won the fight. So again, that whole dynamic, but I just had to bring that up as that example.
So that truth that BJ created, that I never throw punches, or the truth that Nate created, which is you're safe there, right? That's why he throws the shallow left hand over and over. You're safe. Don't worry. Be safe. I can't get you. And it's a lie, right? That's the same thing with any of those things. You can't never throw a lead uppercut. You know why a lead uppercut works? Because you think never throw a lead uppercut, right? You know why a naked leg kick will work? Because you think I'll never throw a naked leg kick. That's when they work, right?
Lead right. Same with the lead right. A lot of people say you should never throw that. Exactly. I believe Floyd throws them quite often.
Yep.
I mean,
100%.
Floyd. So, but like I said earlier, certain people
break these rule sets.
Yeah, because they can.
Yeah, but so they're not rules, is my point, right? And they're not even truths. They are simply novice truths, right? Yeah. So novice truth, that's why I wrote that. Rich, when was the first time you put on a gi or somebody showed you how to do a kimura or like anything?
Late 90s.
Okay. In the late 90s, I will give you some things that were 100% true. Tell me if this was true. You cannot finish a guillotine with the arm in. Late 90s.
Yeah, totally.
That was true. Never cross your legs when you do an arm bar.
Yep. Totally.
What else we got? There's so many of them. And now, of course, arm in guillotine is just the most normal thing for the last 15 years. So people cross their legs doing arm bars all the time.
Guys started doing them with one arm. Jake Shields, for a while was just excellent, and tapping guys with that left and right. So, yeah, that's the beauty of it, man.
I have one for you.
No rules or boundaries, really, right? As far as from a technical standpoint.
Never cross your feet when you strike. Well,
crossing the feet on an armbar just happened not that long ago.
Yeah.
It was down. I forget which guys. I mean, they were both amazing guys. That was analyzed and broken down by some of the purists. And in that moment, it was okay. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Never cross your feet with an arm. Well, except for here. This one's okay.
And that guy can do it. And in that moment,
it's okay.
You should never do that.
Right. But this is martial arts, right? So all of these things. And so if you start to learn these structures, you build this artificial scaffolding of understanding. right? Where you actually don't understand what's going on. It takes you further from an understanding. And so that's what I was getting at, where, there's the way we're talking about martial arts and then the truth. Most of how we're forced to commentate, if you just, show up 11 times a year, put the headset on and do the thing, you got to say, knock out power in both hands, defend the takedown. You just say these things that are sporting terms, again, back to like sporting structure, but they are not truthful. And the more untruthful things that make up your understanding of something, the further you are from knowing what it is.
Yeah.
And it also limits you. You begin to think that your truth shrinks because hey, don't cross your legs, don't do this, that, and the other. One of the ones I actually thought of was, remember there was a debate that judo would not work in modern MMA because you didn't have a gi to throw someone by, and it was Cario Prison started tossing people on their heads using judo, using that skill set that he had developed for many years, and he didn't need a gi. But it was the thought that, well, because you practice with it all the time, you can't practically use this when there's not a gi to grab on.
Yeah.
And Caro, Ronda, amongst others, those two being the more high profile judo practitioners. Leg kicks. There was, certain techniques become in vogue, right? Like there was at one point you shouldn't kick because these wrestlers were going to take you down, and then Mo Smith was like, "Oh, really?
Okay,
yeah." I wish so. I got judo versus wrestling here. I'll get you guys some of this in a second from Black Belt Magazine. I was going to send this to Mallory. January 1970, because then he was going to pull up some of the things, but wow. I slacked. 1970, so that is 51 years ago.
How old were you then, Robin?
I was 1. I was born in 1969. So this is 1970. So wrestlers' threat to judo was the thing. So they go on and they start the thing very eloquently, writing about a woman spectator sitting nearby commented, why do they let those guys in the tournament anyways? They don't have any technique. And then it goes on to describe how these wrestlers are throwing these judo guys through the ground, right? And then it moves down roughhouse tactics. And then they go into how this judo master is saying that, and it's amazing, that shouldn't work. That shouldn't work. But they did. He was also very impressed by the strength. What do you mean it shouldn't work, right? It'll work. It worked, right? So, but what they go on to talk about is, well, if these guys learn technique, they'll be real dangerous. And so the understanding, so you've got judo people 50 years ago, experts, geniuses of it, and it is a brilliant art form, writing about how they are looking at these judo guys and they identify it as brute force. They identify it as like trained power and aggression and all these things. And if only you taught them judo, they'd be even better. What they miss, and that's, no judgment, but what they actually don't understand as you're reading through it, and some of these photos are so great, but what they don't seem to grasp is that wrestling is a martial art. So in this entire thing, you've got all these judo guys trying to figure out what's happening when these wrestlers are coming in and doing well. And they're trying to figure out, they don't know martial arts. Why are they doing well? And very few of them stop and go, no, that is a martial art. And it's a different one. And those are techniques and they're different. It's a really wild thing. Yeah.
Just because you're not in a gi, doing the traditional martial arts, song and dance, right? It's almost viewed that wrestling is just less finesse and just more athleticism and brute strength. That's interesting that conversation was going on in 1970.
1970. So roughhouse tactics. Then there's a really interesting. So roughhouse tactics, what is super cool is as these gentlemen here way ahead of their time. These judokas are trying to understand it. They're looking psychological differences. Wrestlers entering into judo are big men, champions in their own right, and yet they have the courage to try out prowess and learn, even at the expense of being booed, hissed, and jeered at. Some of the reasons for their displeasure and incompatibility of the wrestlers and the spectators come from the psychological differences. So they're kind of trying to figure out what's happening, and they're like, well, they think different, which is real cool, right? Like, so they identify that. And then this is really cool. Borrowed ideas. This is 1970. The idea of borrowing techniques from other sports is not anything new. 1970, right? Yeah. And that's what Professor Kano was constantly borrowing ideas from other sports and adding them to judo. Robert Smith, in his book A Complete Guide to Judo, writes about how Kano opponent is wrestling is known as the fireman's carry. Most likely many other techniques such as Morotogari, the double leg dive, and Usirogari or suplex, and others were incorporated into judo from wrestling. So in 1970, when they're going back and they're looking at it, what we call the fireman's carry and the single and the double, they're like, well, maybe this came to judo from wrestling. Isn't that wild?
Yeah. Speaking of like the truths versus novice truths, I think it's not true that grappling is more of a modern thing. Clearly this was going on. This discussion, this debate, this analysis was going on a long time ago. Because I feel like there's this perception that the striking arts were first, and grappling didn't really, jiu-jitsu, grappling didn't really get into the mix until much, much later. Perhaps that needs to be re-examined right there. That exact conversation and what you're pulling from in 1970. Judo versus wrestling. That's
Yep. And there was this other one, even here, because, we know, and again, April 1970, how dangerous is the judo choke, right? And it's basically some type, it appears to be some modified, it's a photo, and it may not be a high level, guys. It appears to be a modified rear naked choke, right? So, clearly coming from judo, but here, unlike the traditional American counterpart, his judo is an ever-changing sport. And earlier, they were like, for a lot of the Americans, at this time, they were preserving judo, while the Japanese were evolving it.
Yeah.
And I know this is very esoteric, but when I go to Chinatown in Toronto, China doesn't look like Chinatown anymore.
Right.
Chinatown looks like China in the late 1960s. When Chinatown in Toronto was created, right? So there's sort of like this stability that happens. Yeah, it's some wild stuff. Like, you can nerd out over this stuff for a long time.
That is not a conversation I would have expected to be happening at that time in 1970.
Right. What else do we got here? Let's look at a couple more of these. I don't know about you guys if your brains are getting tired, but this is fun, right?
Yeah, no, this is
awesome. What do you like here? What is a martial artist? Actually, that's not bad. When we tie back to this, when we go back, we were talking earlier, if anyone just is popping in and out, we were talking earlier about unwritten rules, what you do and don't do, and how two competitors can agree. What is a martial artist? And Mal, what popped this one up? You were talking about Anderson Silva on his flight home from Tito.
So there was a sporting contest this weekend, and argue about sport versus sport throughout the show, in which Anderson Silva was fighting Tito Ortiz, and everybody probably, if you can't see it, just quick Google because it didn't last all that long. However, at the end of the day, rather into the next day, to be more accurate, both Anderson Silva and Tito Ortiz were flying home, and due to a mix-up in tickets, Tito Ortiz's fiance was not in first class with him. Anderson Silva actually found that out and said, you know what, I'm going to give you my first class ticket. Please go sit up there with your fiance, and I'll go back there. So the first thing I thought of was that, man, what a great martial artist, what a great human being that Anderson Silva is. If you've seen his interviews, he never talks trash about anybody. He just is always respectful, talks about Bruce Lee all the time and everything. So you think about it, that's a great martial artist. That's someone that you think of, and you when you go past and you see the dojo and you see the instructor, and he's got all these little kids there, he's holding pads for him, and he always seems wise and honest, etc., etc. That's what I think people think of when they think of a martial artist.
Yeah. I'm just going to add, and I know Tito a little bit, and I love Tito, but I'm going to do my Tito impression on the plane. Hey, I'm wearing my mask. I'm not trying to say anything, but there's a certain point where, and again, I'm being facetious. Tito's an interesting cat and a legend in his own right. But there's a certain possibility where Anderson was just like, I can't sit next to Tito.
So that was another way of thinking about that.
Perhaps it was more that. It was more practicality than the martial arts spirit. Was like, do I really want to be next to this guy for the next hours?
Yeah, exactly. We're both a little embarrassed about all this. Yeah, it's true. But this does raise a really interesting philosophical question that we'll probably get better at talking about 5 podcasts from now. Mm-hmm. But there is a big, and maybe we'll slowly be able to put our finger on it. But I personally, and this is entirely filtered through my bias and my perspective, which is odd in its own. But I feel like the further we go down the sort of American televised sporting route, the more we get more similar to a football player. And there's nothing wrong with that. We went over sports can be great. And even, and the further we get from a painter or a musician or a rapper or a poet. Mm-hmm. And that, I think that very thing is happening kind of right now. And I also think, because we've kind of created MMA in particular, because it's become the most popular current incarnation. MMA in particular, show looks like this, the sound sounds like this, the venue looks this way, we've got 2 guys, the boards look this way, we commentate it this way, this is what it is, over and over and over. I think at some point we start to go, well, what else is it? Some people love to watch the same thing every Saturday night for 7 years, and others maybe are looking for other aspects of it. That's why we're having this conversation. That's why we're tired of the same conversation, And I think that martial arts element is going to become much more, a much larger force in sort of mainstream fighting.
Yeah. We touched on a lot of this last week, right? I think just this evolution. We're kind of, old is new and whatnot. But for me, the definition of a martial artist is it's kind of evolving with me on my journey. Mm-hmm. As I've matured, as I look at things differently. For example, some guys are great practitioners, but they perhaps can't teach as well, and some guys possess way more knowledge and are less physically gifted, so perhaps it revolves around passion to me, a passion for the arts, respect. Maybe it's more traditional, I guess, the way I'm looking at it, but it's evolving for me, and it's evolved, and I just kind of look at things and see things a little differently these days, and it all goes back to perhaps that's why this thing is so amazing and awesome, right? It's not one thing, right, Robin? You said that. It's just not one thing. It's constantly evolving. I've always loved that about it, and that's what drew me towards martial arts in the first place. The ability to use your imagination, to be creative. The fact that there was this respect and code and honor to it, and there was this tradition, and you could take that, but also make it your own. So I don't know. Hopefully that's making sense.
Right. Yeah, really is.
Kind of like throwing it out there.
Right. Mm-hmm. I've got a statement from a person that we may think is a martial artist, but this sounds very martial arts thing to say. The man who views the world at 50, the same that he did at 20, has wasted 30 years of his life. That was from Muhammad Ali. And it goes directly from what you're saying, Rich, about how as you start to mature, as you start to look more you look at things at age 35 differently than you did at age 30, and at age 40 differently than you did at 35. And especially with your comment about different type of instructors have a different type of feel, a different way of teaching, a different way of presenting knowledge in their head or the techniques to students, whereas some of the best martial artists will make the worst instructors, and some of the worst instructors would make the best martial artists. It's that yin and yang, once again, that we see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all encompassing here. I don't know if there's a wrong answer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that's why I say if you're passionate and you respect, the game, so to speak, you respect the arts. Because for me personally, there's a lot of things that, when you get into the MMA world and you're training for combat, you disregard a lot of these other things, right? You're like, that is completely useless. Couldn't be more wrong. But at that time, I think it was a movement away from respecting, understanding, and applying traditional martial arts, right? It was like the modern day MMA guy would probably laugh at those arts, right? And regard as useless and just say, no, the name of the game is put a guy against the fence, take him down, and beat the shit out of him.
But the 2035 martial artist might laugh at this.
Yeah.
You would presume he would. Like we talked about this last time for sure. We always see these pictures, like the leather helmet football guys, or like the boxers with the mustache, and we think, look how primitive that was. Someone will think that of today. They'll think that of this computer. They'll think that of our martial arts. They'll think that of the way we speak. Someone will think that of us today. We will look as silly to someone as bell bottoms look to us.
Right.
We will.
Just think of how many times, hopefully if you're blessed enough, you're explaining this to your third grandchild, Robin. How many every years? Grandpa Robin, why were people wearing that stuff on their face in 2021? But, it was, hey, this was going on. This is what was happening. But you look back at it and like, wow, it's been so many years. You can see how, what was the purpose of it for that. But just as the same, I mean, look at how far this sport we call MMA has come. Like Rich, you mentioned, we had to collect it together for a rule set so that we are allowed in every state and that we can determine a true winner without someone being completely beaten to a pulp. And you had to modernize, you had to evolve. And I think the word we're using is evolution here.
Yeah, it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. And that's the beauty of it, just like technique. So my last thoughts on it, what is a martial artist? Someone who's creative, curious, and passionate.
I love it. And that should, the art is you, and the art is your life, and you as a husband and father and friend and business person too. So the artist is shaping, you're using the things you learn in the world of combat and learning about yourself to make the art that is your life, right? This is an interesting thing that kind of connects. Should some techniques not be shared? Should you keep some techniques to keep a competitive edge? And the reason that jumped out at me is because I was thinking about this. So if any of the three of us or any of the people who are watching this, if any of us are only going to ever have one great idea in our life, we should protect it at all costs, right? But the point isn't to do that. The point is, if you have one idea, to be capable of having a second and a third and a fifth, that the creation, the learning and the development and the innovation becomes a lifestyle, right? Again, if you only have one great song, one great sentence, one great description of something, one great moment, cherish, protect it. But the goal is to have many. And to do that, and to be able to do that, is to then not need to protect anything. That in fact, by going out and showing your greatest move and doing your best work, and and that being stolen, I mean, you want your ideas to be taken because they force you to have a new idea. I'm hoping that the way that I do my job, that the way Rich does his job, that the way other people do it is copied by people larger. that a Michael Bisping or somebody would be able to do the thing and become larger and force me to have to keep innovating, affect the world around you and continue to innovate. That innovation is supposed to be your lifestyle, not I got this move, I don't want anyone to see it because I'm gonna. And I mean, DJ saving the head kick for 15 years later is an example of maybe you can do both, but the goal is to make innovation an ongoing thing in your life.
You know what? That great question, and it hits on two other topics we've discussed. Unwritten rules, right? Some guys will say, "Hey, man, I'm going to show you this, and you're here training with me in our group. I'm going to show you this, but don't show anyone else." That's kind of an unwritten rule, right?
Yeah.
We're bringing you in, we're exchanging here, and I think it also touches on the truths, right? So, like you said, everything eventually gets out there and gets dissected, and then you move on to something else, right? There's always a move, a technique, something that's in vogue. The oblique kick, that's the new thing. People are training it now. They're studying it. You're either learning how to do it or learning how to deal with it, or both, right?
Both.
You're really doing it right. Years ago, the rubber guard took the grappling world by storm. You don't really see it these days. I mean, Eddie and his Planet Association it still may be a big part of their curriculum, but you don't see. But shortly after that, it was like everyone was trying it, everyone was doing it, and these days you don't. Just things evolve and change.
Yeah. How does that survive? So I have a bare foot, I get my foot up and I lock out your arm and I begin to work on. That's the original situation. I get mission control and I get this, hug my arm and I attack this little spider web. Over time, you learn to do anything that you got to do to not put your hand on the ground. Okay, my thing is done. No, it isn't, because now my job is to innovate that. When Rich is now fighting to prevent his hand from go to the ground, I must build a whole spider web of attacks based on that, so that he has to defend that, thus maybe putting his hand back to the ground, allowing me to do this again. And this is the ongoing nature of it. Why did calf kicks seem to pop up? The calf kicks seem to pop up because everyone fought further apart. Everyone started fighting further apart. So if we're fighting further apart, to prevent everyone, I don't want to grapple with you. It makes me tired. Also, if you take me down, that sucks. I'm going to lose the fight and maybe I'll get hurt. So I'll fight further out. Everyone learns to fight Wonder Boy and whatever, and we begin fighting further. Well, now the longest weapon and the closest target is a calf kick. So we start to do that. Then the observers are like, calf kicks can't be stopped. It's the calf kick fighting championships. This is how fighting's always going to be.
Yeah.
That's not how martial arts works. That's not how martial arts works. We find the answer. We penalize you. We make it the worst thing you could ever do.
Correct.
You want to throw calf kicks at Corey Anderson knocked out Jan Blachowicz, or no, I think it was vice versa. Jan Blachowicz knocked out Corey Anderson. Corey's throwing a calf kick. It's happening every day. We just, it takes a while to notice it. But that is ongoing. The spider web continues. It's an arms race, right? And so that's why you can protect your secret move. And if you've got that one thing, there's two things, that little thing that you do better than anybody else, cool, keep your stuff. But it is an arms race of constant innovation. This is life. Innovation becomes a lifestyle, a way to live.
Absolutely. Great question, though. That's a good one.
Yeah, really, really good. I can't quite read this. My vision is bad.
I'll get it for you. We might laugh at the ideas of the past martial arts and MMA, but it's still the past that people look to when trying to be inspired. We should certainly have respect for the grassroots days. That is essentially martial arts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and the process, we're always at a point in a process. We're never at a destination. Kung Fu is weird, doesn't work. Aikido, it's nonsense, forget about it. Okay? So if we believe that, we start to operate in a world where Kung Fu is nonsense. The thing that's going to knock us out is Kung Fu. Right? That's just how it works. We all start thinking super linear, super explosive, super powerful. All of a sudden, somebody's out there going, you know what, I'm going to train that stuff that you don't think works. I'm trying to do soft style martial arts or whatever. And we see it all the time. We just don't notice it because the narrative remains the same. But there's a lot more flowy, soft style martial arts. There's elements of non-resistance. All of these things are ongoing, happening. We still think we are in a world of boxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and and kickboxing or whatever, but we're not at all. Those are old doctrines that aren't really what we're doing. We just use those words because those are the words we have. That's not really what's happening.
Hey, don't forget Roy Nelson, Kung Fu stylist. I would love to see. I would absolutely love to see Roy doing some Kung Fu.
You know, Larry, great point. And, you know, last week, this was kind of one of the inspirations for this whole gathering here, right? This whole concept of, we got, maybe bored's not the right word. Maybe it is. We were like, and then old became new. Like, we can't forget, you know, the older I get, the more I appreciate, you know, the old school stuff, the traditional stuff, however you want to describe it, the roots. I'm more fascinated by that now than I am in a lot of ways, you know, more so than what we're seeing today, where we, like we said last week, it's turned into a style that's maybe not capturing our imagination as much these days. So we're looking to the past to kind of revive things, shake things up a little bit. So yeah, Larry, 100%, can't forget your roots and the things that we thought were useful or at some point were discarded. You know, maybe we need to take another look at that.
So we got nerds. Like Rich was like, "Where's all the martial arts geeks at when we were going to do this? Look at this one." Similar to teaching, sometimes a student must figure out the hidden curriculum. That's sweet. Yeah, that's really, really nice. It's true. It's true. You know,
if you've ever stood in front of a class of 20, 30 kids or students, and out of that 20 or 30, there's like, you know, there's people who are here for in shape, or they want, you know, there's self-defense, or because their dad is making them do it, or whatever the case is. But then you'll see that sparkle in for one or two, you know, you're like, this is, they're going to want to learn more. These are the ones that can we stay after class? Or can you help me with this? Or I've always got a question, and in that question, it helps inspire you. You know, why is it this way? And you have to think and explain and give them an answer, and it spawns a whole nother thought process. But those special students are going to be the ones that will push everything further. Like what you said, Rich, I think one of the reasons why we lean to the past is because we could see the evolution from the past, and we could see the origination. While we're going through this evolution, for all the things that we will look back to this moment in 20 years, we can't really see that change as it's happening. We can go back and look and like, oh, man,
it's hard to feel when you're in it.
It's hard to feel the change as it's going down. You know.
Yeah. Hey, WizKid, I feel like this is a free masterclass. What a tremendous compliment. Wait till we bring on some real masters. I feel like we're just three passionate martial arts geeks right here that are just trying to talk about something different these days. But we're going to bring on some real masters moving forward, right, fellas?
Lovato probably wants to come on soon. But yeah, we will. In a couple more weeks, once we get kind of settled in a little bit, we will definitely. But sometimes the kid who's in gymnastics will also be noticing something similar to the monkey bars, and they'll also kind of notice something similar to how math works, and that's the kid. Like, that's the smart, you know. Somebody pointed out to me about we were eating broccoli, and you're looking at the broccoli, and it fractals out into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, right? And then, you know, you look at a tree and it's kind of doing the same thing, and within the leaf it's doing the same thing. And then fractures in rock do the same thing. Like frost on your windowsill does the same thing. Your veins and arteries and capillaries do the same thing. Like, certain shit is just in the world. Like, there's certain things that you can make connections to pretty automatically, right? And if you can make connections between your arteries and broccoli, you should be able to make connections between judo and wrestling, right? But sometimes it's just sitting right there. But by studying martial arts, we will learn how to better do martial arts. But we're hoping to learn to make these connections in all things in life, right? So that when you're trying to figure out some business deal, it will balance out with the thing you did in jiu-jitsu that will also make sense about what your son learned in geometry. And that's kind of back to what a martial artist is. That's what, like, the whole point of studying anything deeply is to kind of see it in all things. I think that's in this one, to know the way broadly you see it in all things, right? That's kind of what what we're doing here.
Yeah. And along those lines, the answer can't always be given yes. There's that martial arts saying, like, you're forever you're always learning, right? Like, you're always kind of a white belt
mentality.
Yeah, right. Black belt is a white belt who never quit, all those things. But yes, that's again the beauty of this journey. There is no final destination as far as knowledge, and you're never gonna know it all. Sometimes the answer just isn't there, but you keep searching, you keep learning, and you keep staying curious. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I know we might sound like just total dorks out there in the fight world. There's guys, Robin, that you and I probably know, that are just like, what are you guys talking about?
For sure, that's good.
I hit the guy on the head, and he ain't gonna get up.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of the trash talk that went on, the buildup between Frank Shamrock and Phil Baroni, and it was classic. It was great. Phil was like, martial arts, like, what are you talking about? Like drawing with crayons and stuff. Like he was just totally clowning Frank for Frank being this guy who was like, when I'm in there, my soul is on display. And, Frank is taking it to that level, and just being the martial artist, and Phil being the brawler, and just like, what are you even talking about? Now, martial arts, all this BS, I'm going to kick your ass.
Yep. But that's actually, last time we were left with a few thoughts for the following week. This is one for sure, is Phil doesn't need to know what he's doing for it to be complex. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and how that happens is really cool. The process through which Phil can do an incredibly complex thing, but to him, he's just like, I'm going to bludgeon you with my fist. But then his body and biology and nervous system will learn a complex thing, but then they call it chunking. In Phil's mind, or any other athlete who likes to see it this way's mind, it's a chunked process. The whole process just happens, but it's still highly complex. And that's really interesting. The idea of what is what, right? Like Michael Chandler's body does not care if you call that penetration step the beginning of a double leg takedown or an entry to the jab. His nervous system and body doesn't care what you call that thing. So why are we needing to label these things? Well, we need to understand what we're seeing, and we need to agree on words to discuss it. But our bodies don't need these words, right? When you're learning to do these things, we don't need these words. That's some Robin Black stupid shit. Like
Robin, whatever you're smoking, bro, hook me up. Get number.
Yeah, it's just where it goes. Like caffeine is all I got today, but yeah, I don't know. There's something about once you start to break the overall structures, scaffolding of how you're supposed to think and how you're supposed to see something, and you look at it really far away or really up close, or you look at it in slow motion or fast, or you compare it to something, or use analogy, or you think of it as a poem, or all these different things. Once you start on that, it's hard to see things the old way.
Yeah, that is definitely true.
Never the same again.
Change your thinking, change your mind, change your thinking.
Yeah. Should we wrap this up for today? It was almost 2 hours. That's amazing. Yeah. It's really fun hanging out with you guys.
Oh, definitely. It's 100% fun there. Let's I guess we can throw it out there for the last couple minutes for topics. We always grab topics for next week, or hey, what would you like to touch on? We'll come up with things through the week, and we'll go back and forth and say, I've got a great idea for Wednesday. But anything that, and again, we'll go back and we'll rewatch and reread comments for anybody that's catching this later or along the week. What other topics what are we going to bring to the table for you guys, and what else are we going to discuss?
Yeah. And it's been cool. Like last week, 10,000 people watched or consumed this podcast, and we literally just started, like, we'll just start talking and then we'll figure out as we go. Maybe we'll put up clips and do other things, and we will. So we don't even know where, other than Black Belt Magazine is one and stuff, where our actual homes are yet, but we'll get all that figured out. But anywhere you can see at Rich Chou or at Mallory Woods or me, just send us any thoughts, ideas, anything at all. You got any art or graphics or names of the podcast, just help us out. We're literally just beginning.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's just the beginning, and Robin's everywhere. He's on TikTok. He's on Twitter. He's on Instagram, YouTube, and of course Facebook. We're just I know you're on Facebook because we just became friends, and just give us
Twitter
a shout.
and Instagram. Yeah, find us, follow us. We'll make a Instagram and a Twitter for this podcast once it actually has a name, and then we'll share that. That might still be a couple of weeks, but help us out. But this is super fun. It's these sort of what we were hoping is we just get to hang out with some other martial arts geeks and nerds like ourselves, and we have, and then this thing would sort of shape itself, and it kind of is.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's keep freestyling, guys.
I like it.
Yeah,
like
awesome. All right, I'm going to click this end broadcast thing unless anybody else has anything to say.
Good to go. We'll see you right next week.
We'll see you guys next week. Similar time, similar place.
Thanks, guys.
Enjoy the hostilities.